Turning to the Mahabharata, was it narrated by Vyas and written by Ganesh? This is a popular story. When Vyas conceived the story, he realized he needed a writer to write such a vast, complicated narrative with so many verses. He prayed to the gods and they sent Ganesh to write it for him. Ganesh agreed, but on the condition that Vyas would narrate the story non stop. Otherwise, Ganesh would leave. Vyas agreed but put a condition of his own that Ganesh would write only when he understood a verse. And so, Vyas would interpose his narrative with such complicated verses that made even Ganesh pause and think. That would give Vyas some time to breathe. It became a sort of competition between them. Who first narrated the Mahabharata? In the Mahabharata, it's said that the story is being told to rishis in a forest called Nemeshwan by a Sutradhar known as Sauti, simply the storyteller. Those who listen are called Shaunak. The Sauti is Ugrasrava, one with a booming voice, who had heard the story from his father, Romharshana. Romharshana got his name from the fact that he told stories in such a moving way that his listeners got goosebumps. He in turn had heard it at a yajna held by Janmejaya. The yajna was called Sarpasatra, where one of the Vyas students, Vaisampayan, narrated the story of the Mahabharata. The story goes that Janmejaya is trying to find Takshak, the snake who killed his father, King Parikshit. He is told that Indra is shielding him. Janmejaya decided to hold the Sarpastra Yajna, which will destroy all the snakes in the Brahmand. Rishi Astik comes to visit him and asks him to stop the yajna because it's immoral. He then tells Janmejaya that a week before his death, Parikshit had broken the tape of a rishi by garlanding him with a dead snake. The rishi cursed Parikshit, saying he would die of snake bite. When Janmejaya's grandfather Arjun had burned down a forest to establish Indraprasth, many snakes' homes had been destroyed. So, Takshak had sworn revenge and bitten Parikshit. The rishi warns Janmejaya that the cycle of revenge and counter revenge is unending. His ancestors, the Pandavas, fought the Kauravas not for revenge but for dharma. And yet it was the Kauravas who attained Swarg and the Pandavas Narak. He counsels Janmejaya to hear the story of his forefather and learn from it. In this negative atmosphere where snakes are being burned to death, where Sampayan narrates the Mahabharata to Janmejaya to drive home the truth that Hinsa, violence, does not solve any problem. So, where Sampayan tells Janmejaya the story that Roma Harshana hears and tells Ugrasrava, who tells the rishis, and then we hear it. So, we are the Shaunaks. Yes. How was Vyas a participant in the Mahabharata? In both the Ramayana and the Mahabharata, the narrators participated in this story. In the Ramayana, Sita stays at Valmiki's ashram after being abandoned by Ram during her second exile. In the Mahabharata, Vyas has intercourse with Vichitvirya's widows, Ambika and Ambalika, who give birth to Dhritarashtra and Pandu respectively. The Kauravas and the Pandavas are thus Vyas' descendants, and he is watching his own grandchildren fighting and destroying the dynasty over land and property. Perhaps he composed the Mahabharata to show that violence does not solve problems. He narrates the story to his disciples Vaisampayan, Jaimini, and his son Shaukamuni. Jaimini's story comes from the Markandeya Puran. Jaimini had some doubts about this story, so he went looking for Vyas, who had taken sannyas by then. So he went to Rishi Markandeya, who was considered Chiranjeevi, immortal. But he had taken a vow of silence, Maunvrat. There were four birds who had witnessed the Mahabharata, and Jaimini was directed to clarify his doubts from them. The story of the birds is quite fascinating. During the war at Kurukshetra, one of the arrows hit a pregnant bird who was flying overhead. The bird drops dead, but its eggs are saved by an elephant's bell that falls over them like a protective covering. The birds thus hear and witness the entire war, and they know the reason for it, the inner thoughts of all those involved. Jaimini is famous for writing the Jaimini Ashwamedh Parv, which is about Yudhishthir's Ashwamedh Yajna that takes place after the war. The Parv is a long poem in itself. Did Shiv hear all these stories of the Ramayana and the Mahabharata from Brahma? Interesting question. These stories are told in the time space continuum of the Yugas. The Ramayana is set in the Treta Yuga and the Mahabharata in the Dwapar Yuga. Shiv is beyond, outside the continuum. He is timeless or outside time. He watches the world at all time because our time is cyclical. The Ramayana does not happen just once. It's an eternal story which happens again and again. In one story, when Hanuman goes to Naglok, the king of snake, Vasuki asks him, which Ram has died? Hanuman is taken aback. Vasuki then tells him that a Ram is born and dies in every yug, after which a Hanuman comes to Naglok just as he has now. So Shiv has heard the Ramayana many times. There was a Ramayana is a Ramayana, and the Ramayana will continue to happen over and over again. Similarly, the Mahabharata. This is what is Itihas story. So this is it for today. I'll be back till then. Keep listening beautiful stories and keep smiling.